Thank you very much, Claire. Welcome to the debate here on France 24. More than 2 years into the Syrian conflict, it seems to be taking a frightening turn in recent days, with Israel striking Damascus twice last weekend, with Syria threatening to retaliate, and growing evidence that chemical weapons might have been used. With Lebanon ever so fragile, Turkey on edge, Jordan flooded with refugees, and an international community still deeply divided, could we be witnessing the perfect storm that could plunge the Middle East into conflict? With me to discuss this obviously very worrying issue, we have two guests here on the set. Ziad Majed, who is an assistant professor of Middle Eastern Studies at the American University of Paris. Also on the set, Jonathan Paris, who is a London-based Middle East analyst and a senior fellow with the Atlantic Council of the United States. Joining us via satellite from Tel Aviv, Meir Javed Denfar, who is an Iranian politics lecturer at the Interdisciplinary Center in Herzliya. He's also the co-author of The Nuclear Sphinx of Tehran. And last but not least, joining us via Skype from Monaco, Anton Koslov, who is an associate professor at the American Graduate School of International Diplomacy. So in recent days, things have taken a turn, some fear for the worse, with Israeli striking Syria at the heart of the regime in Damascus.
2 airstrikes over 48 hours, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu did not mention either during his weekly cabinet meeting, despite the move raising tensions in the region. An anonymous Israeli official said strikes in Syria over the weekend targeted missiles from Iran that were on their way to Lebanon's Hezbollah militia.
Israel's policy is that a certain kind of weapon will not reach the hands of terrorists. It's an important policy, essential, and it must be adhered to, as the Prime Minister has said.
Iran accused Israel of seeking to undermine its regional opposition. Meanwhile, Syria called the attacks a flagrant violation of international law.
The international community must recognize the increasingly dangerous repercussions that this attack has on the entire region.
Israel had largely remained on the sidelines, but its effort to target what it calls game-changing weapons headed to Hezbollah puts Damascus in a tricky situation.
Now, Syria cannot retaliate without an approval of Iran and also Hezbollah. I assume that Iran doesn't want to go to war now. This is why they probably will continue to denounce Israeli activities and do nothing.
Israel scrambled resources to its northern border Sunday, boosting its defenses. The United States and the UK showed support, saying it has a right to look after its national security.
And there's clearly a tension at the Israeli-Syrian borders, with 4 UN keepers allegedly being held hostage by an armed group. This is an ongoing development. Jonathan Paris, I want to ask you, is the Israeli strike, the double strike last Friday, last Sunday, a game changer in Syria? We've been witnessing spiraling violence over the past 2 years. The international community trying to find out a way to act. Is Israel maybe changing the whole game?
No, I don't think it's changing the whole game. I think we have to break your question into little pieces. Israel, as you know, has reasons to go in to prevent Lebanon, Hezbollah in particular, from getting game-changing missiles. But I'm more interested, and I think your question's more interested in, what was the impact on the ground in Syria, on the rebels in Syria in particular, seeing that mountain where all these infamous Syrian research facilities are being set on fire in the night of I think it was early Sunday morning. It had a dramatic effect on the rebels, because from those mountains were coming rockets at them, at these civilians in upper Damascus. And to see them being knocked out by the enemy, Israel, they've been taught that this is the enemy south of the border, was kind of revealing. And the fact of the matter is that my sources tell me that in some of the mosques, which are in the rebel neighborhoods, there was actually cheering for Israel for striking at the regime, even though the purpose of Israel's attack was not to strike at Assad, it was to strike at missiles bound for Hezbollah.
Right, because your remarks seem to suggest that Israel did this to support the rebels.
No, I'm saying that was a side effect of it, and an important side effect. And in a sense, that may be the game changer, because up till now, there's been rumors and conspiracy theories that Israel has in fact been supporting the regime, supporting Assad. But now I think it's clear to any Syrian that Israel is not supporting the Assad regime.
Ziad Majed, your take on the recent Israeli stepped-up involvement in the Syrian war?
Yeah, well, first, I don't think Israel is neither supporting the Syrian regime nor supporting the revolution against the Syrian regime. Israel is only concerned by its priorities, by its policies, and there are in Israel conflicting opinions. Some of them used to say that Assad is the devil, but he's the devil that we know, suggesting that him staying in power is no problem. Some others used to say that weakening Assad would mean weakening Iran and disconnecting Iran from the Lebanese Hezbollah. So I think there is no clear position and clear stance, except when it comes to what the Israelis consider it is something related to their own security. Then they might act and attack. And I believe that this attack and the one before and the one in January were much more related to Iranian considerations, considering that Iran is more and more involved in the Syrian conflict. Hezbollah from Lebanon is more and more involved in the Syrian conflict. And that's why the Israelis said that they need to intervene to block this more engagement by Iran and its allies on the Syrian ground close to its direct border. The second thing, it could be also that on the eve of the American-Russian meeting to discuss the Syrian question, the Americans are sending a certain message through allowing this attack to happen, or at least through being complicit about it, is that we're not going to be involved directly, but we cannot push Israel or force Israel not to get involved if your Iranian indirect allies and if your regime is more and more supported by Iran. So I think there are many political messages. However, when it comes to the Syrian revolution, even if the attack targeted positions of the army of Assad that was massacring their people, I think their position is a political one. I'm not talking about some emotional, whether pro or anti the attack. Politically, they're not concerned with Israeli priorities nor with Israeli plans. They're only concerned with the struggle to end with 43 years of Assad despotism. This will not change also the fact that Israel occupies, since 1967, Syrian territories against UN 242 resolution.
We're going to go to Tel Aviv. Meir Javed Demfar, I want to have your take. Did Israel strike Syria, or did Israel strike Hezbollah, or did Israel send a warning to Iran, or all three combined?
I think it was a 3-for-1 package. It was Israel struck one target, and it got basically three different deliverables. On the one hand, Israel has wanted to send a message to Bashar al-Assad not to provide missiles to Hezbollah. And I think now it's become very clear to Mr. Assad that every time he tries to do so, there's a very strong chance that he'll be visited by the Israeli Air Force. I think this is Israel's way of also, weakening Hezbollah, because Hezbollah is currently losing 4 to 5 fighters a day in Syria. And I think this is Israel's way of just contributing to that loss. But I think also it's a question of Iran. What's happening in Syria for now, and I have to emphasize the term for now, is very much in Israel's favor in terms of the weakness it's creating for Iran. The Iranian regime is being seen as the sponsor of one of the biggest massacres of civilians in this region in recent memory. And this is causing great damage to the Iranian regime's image and standing in the region. And at the same time, Syria is turning into a money pit, basically, in terms of Iran sending its money, spending its hard-earned money, which is having less and less of because of sanctions, and also sending its forces to help Bashar al-Assad. And basically, as far as many of us believe, the Iranians are supporting a three-legged horse because Bashar al-Assad's not going to win this. So, on all accounts, for now, it's going well for Israel. And I think the Israeli government really wanted to pile on the pressure with the Iranians to say that every time you try to, support Hezbollah to get weapons from Syria, you're also going to pay a price. Whether this is going to be effective in the long term, I'm not so sure, because we're going to look at the emergence of a much more deadly enemy emerging in Syria, and that is the Al-Qaeda affiliated movements.
I want to get to Anton Koslov because there is a meeting today between Secretary of State John Kerry and his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov. Obviously, Russia has been central to the Syrian issue. Some would say Russia has been an obstacle to finding a resolution to this conflict. How worried are you by what some call an act of war by Israel striking another country, in that case, Syria?
Well, I think the Israeli attack in many ways is related to the fact that the rebels are losing on the ground against the Syrian army. And I think the timing of it is very interesting. Certainly it is a message to Iran, certainly it may be a message to Hezbollah, but in the past months or so we've been seeing Syrian army in fact gaining against all those who oppose the army. So in that sense, I think it is something quite interesting to see Israel. In fact, Israel had been involved implicitly in supporting different rebel groups. I mean, I think it's wrong to say that Israel kept a complete distance from the war. Now, we do know that Israeli intelligence does operate in Syria. So I think in this sense,
are you saying that Israel intelligence is in Syria supporting the rebels? Is this what you're saying?
That's precisely what I'm saying. Yes.
Do you agree that this is the case?
No, this is, in fact, this is exactly similar to the conspiracy theory of the Syrian regime that from the beginning of the revolution, when people were still peacefully demonstrating, calling for dignity and freedom, they were accused of being manipulated either by the Israelis in some moments, and in some other moments they were accused of being Salafis and working for some Gulf monarchies. So I think so far there are no proofs that there are any serious even support of the rebels, not only by Israel, by any government or force in the region. Qatar and Saudi Arabia are sending weapons. There are some Western countries supporting.
No?
Yeah, but it's uncomparable to the Iranian and Hezbollah presence on the ground and to the Russian financial and military support. So there are no way of comparing that. And I don't think it's in Israel's interest, as your guest was saying, and as many observers and politicians are saying, as Daniel Pipes said recently about the necessity of keeping this struggle as long as possible in order to bring enemies to neutralize each other and to fragilize and weaken each other. So I think Israel is neither on the regime side directly nor on the revolution side. It's just let go and keep the damages going.
Jonathan Paris, I want still to ask the question, is Israel acting on behalf of the United States or because the international community is not acting, or is Israel maybe trying to push the international community to act more decisively?
No, I think Ziad and Meir said exactly what I said earlier, why Israel is doing what it's doing. It is not trying to get the United States to do X or Y. It is protecting its own interest. It sees missiles that can cover all of Israel being shipped to Hezbollah, and that's unacceptable. Because Hezbollah...
So Israel is not trying to unseat Bashar al-Assad?
Well, I would put it this way. Israel would prefer that Assad regime go. It doesn't, but it's not an active player in the revolution because it knows that even two reasons. One is there's divisions. You know, he's quite right. There are divisions. And there are some people on the fringe who are not Israelis, like Daniel Pipes, who are making those ridiculous remarks about, both of them fighting, killing each other. That's ridiculous. That is not the Israeli policy. But I do agree, Ziad, that Israel, as a side effect of this bombing, has really gained a lot of support from the average, emotionally perhaps, from the average Sunni watcher on the television and from the people in Upper Damascus who saw those fires. This is what I'm hearing from the rebel leaders who are in Europe right now. They are saying, please, Israel, do it again. But Israel will not do it again because Israel has done what it wanted to accomplish its mission.
But these are emotional exaggerations.
They are
more
emotional,
than,
but it's an interesting
rational and
emotion.
political one.
Anton Koslov, I want to get back to you, maybe get the Russian view. Are you seeing Israel as doing the job the West would like to do, but is not daring to do openly?
No, I don't see that. First of all, I'd like to go back to one of the speakers who commented on my remarks. There are clear admissions by Qatar, by Saudi Arabia about financing and helping the rebels, the so-called rebels. So let's not say that nobody is helping them. It's just Russia financing Bashar al-Assad. This is ridiculous. This is total misrepresentation of what's going on the ground. That's one thing. The second thing, sure, Israel is not going to support either the rebels or it's not going to support Bashar al-Assad, but it has its own interests, and therefore we can say legitimately has intelligence people working inside of Syria. I mean, it's been always like that, and there's nothing new about it.
Right. In terms of Russia's position, do you see any possible change? I've talked about the meeting with John Kerry today. There is still a basic disagreement on what to do with Bashar al-Assad.
No, there's not going to be any change. Russia will not give up Bashar al-Assad.
Why?
Why?
Yes.
Because what are the alternatives? I mean, it's going to be an all-out civil war with the very murky outcome. It's going to be a very similar scenario like in Afghanistan after the departure of the Soviet troops and the protracted civil war. It's going to be a new amorphous semi-terrorist networks operating there.
Just one clarification. Your Russian guest completely misunderstood what I said. I said Qatar and Saudi Arabia do support the rebels. Nevertheless, this is uncomparable to the Iranian, Hezbollah, and Russian support to the regime. He used a term that is not very polite, but I will not comment on that.
Okay, so point taking. Meir Javindefar, very quickly, is Israel trying to break the deadlock, the diplomatic deadlock, by, of course, protecting its interests, but maybe trying to push things in Syria?
To be honest with you, I see this is a much of a military reaction to a threat that's emanating from Syria. I don't see a political, I don't see a policy here in terms of changing the political situation in Syria. And I have to say that also I think we are, despite the attack, I think we are putting too much emphasis on what's happening between Syria and Israel. I think we have to look at the broader picture. We are looking at a civil war that's going to be more ferocious than Iraq. We're looking at a civil war that's going to reach probably other neighboring countries. And we're looking at a civil war that's going to create more massacres than Bosnia. And I wish the Arab world, especially together with the West, start thinking of how to prevent this, because this is a disaster in the making.
Okay, we'll talk about the broader regional implications in part 2 of the debate. We'll have to take a break right now, and we'll be back with some of the news headlines.